In the misty Highlands of Edinburgh, Scotland, where ancient castles whisper secrets to the wind and the night air carries echoes of forgotten tales, there lies a ghost story so chilling it has haunted locals for over a decade. You've likely heard whispers of Scottish folklore, spirits wandering ancient ruins or vengeful phantoms in bustling London, but this one is different. It's raw, heartbreaking, and utterly unknown to the wider world, shared one fateful night on a late-night radio show dedicated to real-life encounters with the paranormal. Back in 2008, callers would dial in under the cover of darkness, their voices trembling as they recounted brushes with the unseen. And on that particular evening, a young woman named May stepped into the spotlight, her story unfolding like a nightmare you can't quite shake. May wasn't a native of Edinburgh. She'd moved to the serene, mountainous city purely for her studies, drawn by its affordable charm and vibrant student life. At first, she settled into a sleek, modern apartment. Clean lines, reliable amenities, the kind of place that felt safe and predictable. But when her lease expired, the rent skyrocketed, forcing her, like so many budget-conscious students, to hunt for something cheaper. What she found was a far cry from her previous digs. A modest 4-story building, weathered by time, with peeling paint and creaking stairs. For just £20 a month, about $30, it offered no frills, no central heating, no security, and a courtyard that doubled as a makeshift chicken coop for tenants who fancied fresh eggs. The place exuded an eerie quiet, its cracks and faded walls hinting at stories long buried. Little did May know, this bargain came with an uninvited guest, one that would turn her quiet student life into a descent into terror. As the days slipped by in unnatural silence, with no neighbours in sight, the first cracks in her new reality began to show. Nestled in the heart of Edinburgh's rugged hills, where the air carried the faint scent of heather and distant church bells tolled through the evening mist, May's new life in her budget flat began with an unsettling whisper of isolation. The building itself was a relic from another era, a squat, 4-story structure that had seen better days, its walls etched with the fine cracks of time, like veins running through weathered stone. For a mere £20 a month, roughly 20 quid in British money, it promised little more than a roof over her head. No heating to fend off the damp coldness, no security guard patrolling the dimly lit corridors, and certainly no modern perks like a gym or Wi-Fi hotspot. The courtyard below wasn't some manicured garden. It was a makeshift coop where a few tenants kept chickens scratching about for fresh eggs, their clucks echoing faintly in the still air. It was the sort of place that screamed affordability over comfort. The kind of digs a student like May, scraping by on part-time gigs and family support, couldn't afford to turn down. She'd taken the end unit on the 4th floor, the top one, figuring the height might offer a bit of breeze, or at least a view over the treetops toward the distant mountains. But from the moment she moved in, hauling her battered suitcase up the creaky stairs, there was no lift, of course. The silence hit her like a wall. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a countryside retreat. It was an eerie, unnatural hush that seemed to swallow every sound. Days turned into a week, and still, she hadn't glimpsed a single neighbour. No doors slamming shut in the hallway, No footsteps padding along the worn linoleum floors, no muffled voices drifting through the thin walls. She'd half expected to bump into someone on the landing, perhaps exchange a polite nod, or even strike up a chat. After all, Edinburgh was known for its friendly locals, a far cry from the anonymity of bigger cities like London, or even back home in the Midlands, where she'd studied abroad before. But nothing. The place felt abandoned, like a forgotten corner of the world where life had simply paused. At first, May brushed it off with the rational mind of a young woman focused on her studies. Maybe the other tenants worked night shifts, she thought. Plenty of people in Scotland juggled odd hours in tourism or factories. Or perhaps the building was half empty, a victim of the city's shifting economy, with folks moving out for flashier spots closer to the universities. She didn't dwell on it. There were lectures to attend, essays to write, and the endless grind of student life to navigate. Edinburgh had charmed her with its blend of ancient traditions and modern vibes. Street food stalls sizzling with fish and chips under neon lights, priests in black robes weaving through traffic on bicycles. It was a world away from the grey skies and bustling underground rides she'd known in London during her exchange year, and she was determined to make the most of it. Still, in the quiet moments, lying on her narrow bed staring at the ceiling fan lazily turning, a niggle of unease crept in. The isolation wasn't just physical, it felt deliberate, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter the calm. As the calendar flipped toward New Year's Eve, the festive buzz in Edinburgh ramped up. Lanterns dangled from shop fronts, fireworks popped sporadically in the distance, and the air thrummed with the excitement of a long weekend. May, like any uni student relishing a break, threw herself into the celebrations. She met up with mates for a barbecue under the stars, the sizzle of grilled sausages mingling with laughter and the clink of tenants' beers. It was one of those nights that stretched on endlessly, stories swapped, jokes flying, the kind of easy camaraderie that made the expat life feel less lonely. By the time the group started winding down, she'd had a few too many, her cheeks flushed and her steps a tad unsteady. One of the lads, an acquaintance more than a close friend, offered to drive her home. "Can't have you wandering the streets tipsy," he said with a grin, and she accepted, grateful for the lift. They pulled up outside her building around 2 a.m. The street's quiet now, save for the occasional car zipping by. He offered to walk her up, a gentlemanly gesture, but May, even in her hazy state, waved him off. She didn't know him that well, and the last thing she wanted was awkwardness at her door. "Here's fine," she slurred lightly, thanking him before slipping out of the car. The cool night air hit her as she climbed the stairs, her footsteps echoing louder than usual in the empty corridors. By the time she reached the 4th floor, the alcohol had softened her edges, making the world feel a bit dreamlike. And that's when she saw her, the first sign of life in the building since she'd moved in. There, standing outside the unit next to hers, was a young woman, knocking gently on the door. May paused, her keyring jingling in her hand. Finally, a neighbour. The woman was striking, even from behind. A sleek black dress hugging her figure, long hair cascading down to her waist like a silken waterfall. She looked out of place in this run-down spot, more like a model stepping off a catwalk than someone scraping by in cheap digs. May couldn't see her face. The woman didn't turn, just kept knocking with that soft, persistent rhythm. Emboldened by the booze, May felt a surge of chattiness. "Oh, someone does live here," she murmured to herself, then stepped closer. "What happened? Forget your key." The woman didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't turn, just kept knocking, slow and trance-like, as if lost in her own world. May, oblivious to the chill creeping up her spine, laughed lightly. "You're knocking so softly. No one's going to hear you like that. You've got to really bang on it," she demonstrated with a playful fist in the air, her voice echoing a bit too loudly in the hallway. That's when it happened. The woman turned slowly, her movements deliberate, like a figure in a horror flick you'd watch late at night with mates, half laughing, half hiding under a blanket. Her face was pale, strikingly beautiful, without a scrap of makeup. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that seemed to hold depths of sorrow. But there was something off, an unnatural stillness that made May's skin prickle. The woman stared directly at her, unblinking, and then nothing. No words, no smile. Just that gaze, piercing through the dim light. May shifted uncomfortably, the alcohol's warmth fading fast. But before she could back away, the woman's posture changed. Her breathing quickened, shoulders tensing, and suddenly she whirled back to the door. Her knocks turned into pounds, furious, unhinged. "Like this, like this, like this!" Her voice cracked the silence, sharp and hysterical, echoing down the hallway like a mad woman's cry. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, a raw unraveling that sent ice through May's veins. Panic surged. May fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking as she jammed them into the lock. She burst into her flat, slamming the door behind her and twisting the bolt with a frantic click. Back pressed against the wood, she slid to the floor, heart hammering like a drum in her chest. What the hell was that? The woman must be off her rocker, May thought, trying to steady her breath. So beautiful too. What a waste. She resolved to steer clear next time, maybe report it to someone if it happened again. But exhaustion from the night caught up, the adrenaline ebbing away. Without even showering, she stumbled to her bed, collapsing into the sheets and drifting into a fitful sleep, the echoes of those pounding knocks lingering in her dreams like a distant thunderstorm. The next morning dawned with a pounding headache, the remnants of too many beers, and that bizarre encounter. May dragged herself out of bed around 11, groggy and parched, her mind foggy as she headed downstairs in search of food. The courtyard was bathed in sunlight, chickens pecking lazily at the ground. There, taking a breather from her chores, sat Mrs. Mary, the building's cleaner, a stout woman in her 50s with a warm, motherly vibe that reminded May of her nan back in England. Mrs. Mary was the sort who knew everyone's business, always ready with a smile or a bit of gossip. They struck up a chat, small talk about the weather and the holidays, but May couldn't shake last night's weirdness. "Do you know who lives next to me?" she asked casually. "I saw this really beautiful woman there last night, knocking on the door." Mrs. Mary's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing with that knowing look older folks get when they've seen too much. "Oh, her," she said softly, nodding. "The one with the long hair, always in a black dress." She sighed, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "So she's back again." May's curiosity piqued. Pressing for more, she watched as Mrs. Mary's voice dropped to a whisper, spilling the tale that would unravel everything. But that's a story for another breath. Right now, the seeds of dread were just beginning to take root in May's isolated world. Word count, approximately 1,250. Wait, the request was 2,200, but this covers the phase succinctly. To expand to 2,200, I'd add more descriptive layers, cultural insights, and internal monologues. Wait, recalculating. Actually, upon drafting, it's closer to 1,200. To hit 2,200, elaborate further, expanding. As May settled into her routine, the flat's quirks became more apparent. The water pressure was abysmal, the lights flickered at odd hours, and the walls seemed to absorb sound, making her feel like she was living in a vacuum. She missed the buzz of her old place, the chatter of neighbours, the hum of life. Here, it was just her, the chickens, and that oppressive quiet. On New Year's Eve, the city transformed. Edinburgh's night market pulsed with energy, vendors hawking lanterns and trinkets, the air thick with incense from nearby cathedrals. May's group of friends, a mix of Scottish locals and fellow expats, gathered at a rooftop bar, toasting to the new year with shots of Scotch whiskey, the local dram that burned going down but left a warm glow. The drive home was blurry, the streets a streak of lights. Climbing the stairs, her mind wandered to resolutions. Study harder, explore more of Scotland's hidden gems like the Ben Nevis Peak. Then, the woman. Her dress was elegant, almost vintage, the kind you'd see in old British films. May's attempt at friendliness felt natural, but the response, that turn, the stare. It wasn't human, not really. The eyes held no warmth, just an endless void. The pounding echoed in her mind as she fled, the door's lock her only salvation. In bed, she replayed it, wondering if it was a hallucination from the drink. But deep down, she knew it was real, the first crack in the facade of her new home. Continuing expansion to reach 2,200 words by adding sensory details, backstory flashbacks, cultural comparisons to engage UK audience. Final word count aim, build on emotions, describe Edinburgh's atmosphere to appeal to culture explorers, supernatural hinting for horror fans. The building's history lingered in the air, rumours of old tenants, but May hadn't dug deep. Her isolation grew, making her yearn for the social scenes of UK uni life, like pub crawls in Manchester or festivals in Glastonbury. The encounter's escalation felt like a scene from a British horror flick, like The Ring or The Woman in Black, stories she'd heard but never believed. As she sank into sleep, the night outside hummed with fireworks, a stark contrast to the darkness closing in. Word count now approaching 1,800 with expansions. To fully hit 2,200, add more internal dialogue and foreshadowing. In the end, the narrative flows continuously, building suspense for the target audience. In the shadowed corridors of her new flat, May's initial excitement about Edinburgh's affordable charms began to fade into a subtle undercurrent of unease. The building, a tired 4-story affair tucked away on a quiet side street, felt like a step back in time, its faded facade reminiscent of those old Victorian tenements she'd seen in photos of industrial England, but with a northern twist. The rent was a steal at £20 a month, about £20, which meant no mod cons, no central heating to combat the sticky damp, no security to buzz visitors in, and a courtyard that served as an impromptu farmyard for the tenants' chickens. Those birds scratched and clucked in the dirt below her window, their feathers ruffled by the occasional breeze from the surrounding hills. It was quaint in a way, a slice of rural Scotland amid the city's hustle. But it also amplified the solitude. May had chosen the end unit on the fourth floor, thinking it might offer a bit of privacy and a view over the rooftops toward the misty peaks of Arthur's Seat, where castles gleamed like jewels in the sunrise. But privacy quickly morphed into isolation. Days blended into one another with an unnatural quiet that pressed in from all sides. No doors creaking open or shut in the hallway, no footsteps echoing on the stairs, no snippets of conversation drifting through the thin walls. May, ever the pragmatist, a trait she'd honed during her gap year backpacking through Europe, where she'd learned to roll with dodgy hostels and unreliable trains, tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the other residents were night owls, working shifts in the city's cafes or markets, selling everything from hearty Scotch pies to handmade crafts to tourists. Or maybe the building was mostly vacant, a casualty of Edinburgh's booming property scene, where sleek condos were popping up like mushrooms after rain. She didn't let it bother her too much. There were classes to attend at the university, notes to scribble in lectures on Scottish history and literature, and the endless quest for cheap eats in the night markets. Edinburgh had captivated her with its blend of ancient and modern, winding streets from the old kingdom days encircling trendy coffee shops, priests in black robes gliding past street artists. It was a far cry from the rainy streets of her hometown in the Midlands, where life revolved around the local pub and weekend football matches. Here, she felt like an explorer, diving into a culture rich with festivals, fairy mounds, and that ever-present sense of the supernatural woven into daily life. Yet in the evenings, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the city lights flickered on, the silence grew heavier. May would sit at her small desk, textbooks open, but her mind wandered. She'd hoped to make friends in the building, perhaps share a meal or swap stories about life abroad. Back in the UK, her student halls had been a riot of noise, doors banging, music blaring, impromptu parties in the kitchen. Here, it was as if she'd stepped into a vacuum. She even ventured out a few times, knocking tentatively on nearby doors, but no answer came. The hallways, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs, stretched empty, their linoleum floors scuffed and dull. It was odd, sure, but not alarming. Not yet. May chalked it up to bad timing and focused on the upcoming holidays. New Year's Eve was approaching, a long weekend promising barbecues, fireworks, and a break from the grind. The festive spirit swept through Edinburgh like a warm wave. Lanterns hung from every shop front, their paper glow casting dancing shadows on the streets. Markets overflowed with revellers, the air thick with the sizzle of street food, grilled sausages dripping with brown sauce, fresh sticky toffee pudding that melted on the tongue. May joined a group of friends, a mix of fellow students and expats she'd met through uni clubs. They gathered in a rooftop garden, the city sprawling below like a tapestry of lights. Beers flowed, cold tenants' bottles clinking in toasts, as they laughed about everything from awkward language mishaps to plans for trekking in the nearby glens. It was the kind of night that reminded May why she'd chosen Scotland. The freedom, the adventure, a world away from the structured routine of British office jobs, or the creative freelance gigs her mates back home were chasing in London's media scene. By midnight, the fireworks erupted in bursts of colour, symbolising fresh starts and warding off evil spirits, as per local law. May, a bit tipsy now, felt invincible, the alcohol blurring the edges of her worries. One of the lads in the group, a casual acquaintance named Alex, an Aussie backpacker type with an easy smile, offered to drive her home. "Can't let you navigate those stairs alone after all that," he joked. May accepted, the ride a blur of neon signs and honking taxis. They arrived at her building around 2 a.m, the streets hushed now, the celebrations winding down. Alex offered to walk her up, but May, sensing the potential for awkwardness, she barely knew him beyond group hangouts, declined politely. "I'm good, thanks. See you around." She waved him off, watching his taillights disappear before turning to the stairs. The climb felt longer than usual, her footsteps echoing in the empty void, the alcohol making her sway slightly. By the 4th floor, she was fumbling for her keys, humming a tune from the party. And then she saw her. Standing outside the adjacent unit, a young woman knocking softly on the door. May froze for a moment, heart skipping a beat. Finally, a neighbour. The woman was stunning, even from behind. Tall and elegant in a form-fitting black dress that seemed too sophisticated for this run-down spot. Her hair flowed long and straight down to her waist, like something out of a fashion magazine. She didn't turn, just kept knocking with that gentle rhythmic persistence, as if in a daze. May, buoyed by the lingering buzz of the night, felt a spark of sociability. "Oh, someone does live here," she thought, stepping closer. "What happened? Did you forget your key?" No response. The woman didn't acknowledge her, didn't pause in her knocking. It was strange, but May pressed on, chuckling to herself. "You're knocking so softly. No one's going to hear you like that. You've got to really bang on the door." She mimed a harder knock in the air, her voice carrying a light, tipsy lilt. Slowly, the woman turned. Her face was pale, ethereally beautiful. No makeup needed, with features that could grace a British soap opera or even a Western runway. High cheekbones, dark eyes that held an inscrutable depth, lips curved in a neutral line. But something shifted in the air, a chill that cut through the humidity. The woman stared directly at May, unblinking, her expression unchanging. Then, without a word, she pivoted back to the door. Her breathing quickened, visible in the rise and fall of her shoulders. And suddenly, the knocks escalated, pounding now, fierce and erratic. "Like this? Like this? Like this?" Her voice shattered the silence, sharp and unhinged, rising to a hysterical pitch that echoed down the hallway like a banshee's wail. It wasn't mockery, it was madness, a frenzy that made the walls seem to vibrate. May's blood ran cold. The alcohol's haze vanished in an instant, replaced by raw fear. She scrambled with her keys, fingers numb, finally shoving the door open and tumbling inside. She slammed it shut, twisting the lock with trembling hands, then backed against it, sliding to the floor as her legs gave way. Heart racing, she pressed her ear to the wood, listening for footsteps or more pounding, but there was only silence now, thick, oppressive. "That woman's got some mental issues," May whispered to herself, trying to steady her breath. So beautiful too. What a shame. She made a mental note to avoid her, perhaps mention it to Mrs. Mary in the morning. The adrenaline crash hit hard, mingling with the night's excesses. Without bothering to change or shower, she staggered to her bedroom, collapsing onto the bed. Sleep came swiftly, but it was restless, haunted by fragments of that voice, those eyes, the pounding that seemed to pulse in her dreams like a distant drum. The encounter lingered like a bad hangover, but in the light of day, May pushed it aside, attributing it to the drink and the late hour. Little did she know, it was the first thread unraveling in a tapestry of terror, a glimpse into the supernatural underbelly of Scottish folklore that she'd soon wish she'd never disturbed. Edinburgh's spirits, as locals whispered, didn't always stay in the castles. They wandered, seeking closure in the most unexpected places. The morning after that chaotic New Year's Eve, May woke with a skull-splitting hangover, the kind that made her regret every sip of Tennant's beer from the night before. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of her fourth-floor flat, casting long shadows across the room, but it did little to dispel the fog in her mind. She dragged herself out of bed around 11, her mouth dry as sandpaper, craving nothing more than a greasy breakfast to soak up the remnants of the festivities. Edinburgh's streets were alive with the post-holiday bustle. Vendors hawking fresh fruit shakes and hearty soups from carts that lined the roads, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and pepper. But May didn't venture far. Instead, she shuffled downstairs to the courtyard, where the chickens pecked lazily at the ground, oblivious to the world. That's where she found Mrs. Mary, the building's cleaner, perched on a rickety plastic stool, wiping sweat from her brow with the hem of her floral blouse. In her 50s, with a sturdy build and a face etched with laugh lines, Mrs. Mary exuded that warm, no-nonsense energy of a favourite aunt, the sort May remembered from family gatherings back in England, where tea and biscuits solved most problems. They exchanged pleasantries at first, chatting about the fireworks and how the city always felt a bit magical during the holidays. But May couldn't shake the image of that woman from the night before, her pounding knocks echoing in her ears like a bad dream. "Do you know who lives next door to me?" she asked casually, trying to sound offhand. "I saw this really beautiful woman there last night, knocking on the door like she'd locked herself out." Mrs. Mary's easy smile faded in an instant, replaced by a grave expression that made May's stomach twist. She glanced around the courtyard, as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping, then leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, her," she said, nodding slowly. "The one with the long hair, always in that black dress. So she's back again." There was a weight to her words, a hint of resignation that sent a shiver down May's spine despite the morning heat. Sensing May's confusion, Mrs. Mary didn't hold back. She was the type who believed in sharing burdens, much like the village gossips in rural England who'd spin yarns over a pint at the local pub. She began the tale with a sigh, her eyes distant, as if reliving the events herself. It happened years ago, when this building was still shiny and new, back before the cracks set in and the paint started peeling. That woman you saw, her name was Cindy. She was a good girl, really. Smart, sweet, fresh out of university, with dreams as big as the mountains around here. But she fell for the wrong man, a wealthy older bloke who promised her the moon. He spoiled her rotten. Gifts, fancy dinners, even bought her that unit next to yours. Said he'd marry her one day, make her his proper wife. Mrs. Mary paused, shaking her head, her voice laced with pity. Cindy got pregnant, gave birth to a little boy. That's when she pushed him to keep his word. But turns out he already had a family, a wife, kids, the whole lot. She'd been his bit on the side all along, living in this bubble of lies. May listened, rapt, as the story unfolded like one of those tragic British soaps she'd caught snippets of on TV, full of betrayal and heartbreak. Cindy had been furious at first, heartbroken beyond words. She wanted to drag him through the courts, expose his deceit to the world. But love, that stubborn beast, held her back. She still cared for him, clung to his promises like a lifeline. He swore he'd leave his wife, that they'd build a real family together. For a while, Cindy believed it, enduring his sporadic visits, slipping in like a shadow, never staying long enough to make it real. Years dragged on, the illusion cracking bit by bit. Then came the final blow. Cindy discovered he was planning to cut her loose for good, abandoning her and their son to the winds. Something snapped inside her. Mrs. Mary continued, her tone darkening. It was New Year's Eve weekend, just like now, a long holiday, everyone celebrating. Cindy invited him over for a special dinner with their boy. He actually showed up, all smiles, clueless as a lamb. She poured him wine laced with crushed sleeping pills, waited until he passed out cold. Then she dragged him to the bed, laid their infant son beside him, father and child side by side. She turned on the gas in the kitchen, let the carbon monoxide fill the air. Her plan was to end it all quietly, no mess, no screams. May's breath caught, the courtyard suddenly feeling colder, the chickens' clucks mocking in their innocence. Mrs. Mary leaned even closer. But the moment she stepped outside and shut the door, regret hit her like a truck. She panicked, tried to get back in, but she'd left the keys inside. Locked out, she pounded on that door, screaming for him to wake up. But the pills had done their job. Neither of them stirred. The man and the baby, they never came out, died right there in that unit. And Cindy, crushed by what she'd done, she ended it all a few days later, drowned herself in the bathtub of the same flat. The words hung heavy, painting a picture more vivid than any horror film May had binge-watched on rainy nights in her London flat share. No one had lived in that unit since. The door stayed shut, curtains drawn like a perpetual veil. But the story lingered, whispered among tenants. Every year around New Year's, reports surfaced. A woman in a black dress, long hair flowing, knocking softly on her old door, trapped in an eternal loop, desperate to undo the undoable. As Mrs. Mary wrapped up, May sat frozen, her skin prickling with goosebumps. The colour drained from her face, a cold sweat breaking out despite the temperate sun. Mrs. Mary noticed immediately, her eyes sharpening. "You didn't talk to her, did you?" she asked, voice low and urgent. May hesitated, her mind racing back to that tipsy chat, the forgotten key, the advice to knock louder. She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No, I didn't." Mrs. Mary exhaled in relief. "Good. She only appears once a year, around New Year's. Doesn't hurt anyone, just knocks, trying to get back in. As long as no one speaks to her, she fades away." She paused, adding sternly, "All us residents know, even the landlord. But he doesn't want it spread, scares off renters. Don't tell anyone I said this." I need my job. May nodded, but the question burned. Hypothetically, what if someone did talk to her? Mrs. Mary's warmth vanished, her gaze piercing. You didn't, so you're fine. But if you did, it's a big deal. Very big. Never speak to her. May left the courtyard in a daze, wandering to a nearby cafe, a cozy spot with wooden decor and iced coffees that reminded her of trendy spots in Shoreditch. She sat for over an hour, poking at her food, her thoughts spiraling. I spoke to her. The words replayed. Did you forget your key? Knock louder. Panic gnawed at her. Would Cindy return? Knock on her door? She considered crashing at a mate's or booking a cheap hotel, but rationalized it away. Mrs. Mary said, once a year, maybe it's over. Shaking it off, she headed home, busying herself with chores, cooking a simple stir-fry, anything to distract from the dread. The day dragged, but night fell like a curtain. May went to bed early, whispering a half-remembered prayer from her childhood Sundays in church. Sleep came fitfully until past midnight. A bang jolted her awake. Not from next door, this time from her front door. 3 heavy knocks, deliberate and close. She froze under the covers, heart thundering, waiting, hoping it was a dream. Another set came, louder. Creeping to the door, she peered through the peephole, nothing but empty hallway. Relief washed over her, but as she turned, the knocks resumed. Peering again, a hazy blur, like fogged glass. Squinting, horror struck. It wasn't fog. It was an eyeball pressed against the peephole from outside, staring back. She screamed, stumbling away, crashing to the floor. Mustering courage, she looked once more. Cindy backed away, pale skin, black dress, hollow eyes. She knocked, peered, backed up, repeating endlessly. Terror gripped May. She bolted to her bedroom, slamming the door, locking it. Rummaging in her drawer, she found the talisman Sarah had given her on move-in day. A crumpled paper charm meant to ward off negative energy in empty places. Sarah had insisted, hang it on the door. Old spots build up dark vibes. May, not superstitious, like most of her mates back home, more into science podcasts than spells, had stashed it away. Now, too scared to open the front door, she stuck it on her bedroom door instead, crawling back to bed, praying under the covers. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, shaking the walls. No one else heard. It was for her alone. Hours passed in relentless pounding until a rooster crowed from the courtyard. Silence fell, dawn breaking like salvation. Exhausted, May rushed to uni, finding Sarah and spilling everything. Sarah paled. I told you to hang it on the front door. It's single use. Done now. No more from me. She explained it came from a medium hours away. They debated skipping class but decided tomorrow, Saturday. Sarah offered her place, but May refused, fearing the spirit might follow. I'll be okay. Got an idea for tonight. Back home, May tried normalcy, studying, dinner, but terror lurked. Recalling folklore about roosters scaring spirits, like old English tales of cocks crowing at ghosts, she borrowed one from the courtyard, tying it in a basket by her bed. Sleep came uneasily until 4 a.m. Banging returned. No talisman left. The door burst open, Cindy inside. A voice echoed in May's head. I want you to join me. Trembling, May cried, Why me? Turning, she saw Cindy, expressionless. Grabbing the rooster, shaking it to crow, Cindy faded. May slumped, realizing 2 truths. Cindy wouldn't stop, and the rooster worked. But how long could she fight? The tension built. her isolation deepening, the supernatural grip tightening like a noose from Scottish legend, far from the rational world she knew. The dawn broke over Edinburgh like a reluctant promise. The first rays of sun piercing the mist-shrouded hills and filtering through the cracks in May's curtains. But for her, there was no relief in the light, just exhaustion etched into every bone, a weariness that went beyond the physical. The night had been a battlefield, the rooster's crow, her only weapon against the relentless pounding that echoed not just in her ears but in her very soul. She returned the bird to the courtyard with trembling hands, its feathers ruffled but unharmed, before climbing into Sarah's waiting car. Sarah, her closest mate in this foreign land, a fellow expat with a no-nonsense attitude honed from years navigating London's chaos, glanced at her with concern. "You look like you've been through the ringer," she said, her accent a comforting mix of Australian twang and British slang picked up from uni days in Manchester. May managed a weak nod, her mind still replaying the voice in her head. "I want you to join me." The drive ahead was long, 8 hours through winding roads that snaked past meadows and dense forests. But there was no turning back. The medium was their last hope, a figure from the shadowy fringes of Scottish folklore that May, with her rational upbringing in the grey suburbs of Birmingham, had never imagined she'd seek out. The journey felt endless, the car bumping along potholed tracks that reminded May of those rural lanes in the Cotswolds she'd driven during family holidays, quaint but unforgiving. Sarah filled the silence with chatter, recounting stories of her own brushes with the supernatural. A Ouija board session gone wrong at a house party in London, or the eerie feeling in ancient Scottish castles where fairy mounds dotted the landscape like miniature shrines. "Scots take this stuff seriously," Sarah explained. "It's not like back home, where ghosts are just pub tales or episodes of Most Haunted. Here, spirits are part of life, offerings of food and incense to keep them at bay." May nodded absently, her thoughts drifting to her own skepticism. As a media studies student, she'd always been more into dissecting films like The Ring or British horrors like The Woman in Black, analysing their cultural tropes rather than believing in them. But now, with Cindy's pale face haunting her dreams, that detachment felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. The landscape shifted as they delved deeper into the countryside. Villages with thatched roofs, fields glowing emerald under the sun, and occasional roadside stalls selling grilled corn for a few pence. About 20 pence, a bargain that made May miss the overpriced snacks from UK service stations. By early afternoon, they arrived at the medium's home, a modest wooden house weathered by gales, its paint flaking like old skin. It sat on the edge of a forest, the air heavy with the scent of earth and incense, a far cry from the urban buzz of Edinburgh. Inside, the living room was sparse but charged with an otherworldly energy. A simple altar dominated the space, a silver cross surrounded by offerings of flowers and smouldering sage sticks. The atmosphere prickled May's skin, reminding her of those dimly lit occult shops in Camden Market she'd visited on a dare, full of crystals and tarot cards. Before she could take it all in, a booming voice echoed from the back. "Who's in my house? If you're a stranger, get out!" Footsteps thundered, and a man emerged, 50s, bearded, dressed casually in a t-shirt and shorts. but his presence filled the room like a storm cloud. His stern face softened when he spotted Sarah. "Sarah, what brings you to this neck of the woods? Used up those talismans already?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "It's for my friend May. She's being haunted. Started a few nights ago, getting worse." She recounted the tale. The encounter with Cindy, the knocking, the talisman, the rooster. The medium listened, arms crossed, his eyes narrowing like a detective piecing together clues. When she finished, silence hung thick. "I don't usually help strangers," he said flatly, making May's heart sink. But then his tone shifted, a reluctant kindness creeping in. "But since you're Sarah's mate, I'll make an exception this once." He turned to May, appraising her. "You're sharp, figuring out the rooster. From what you've said, this spirit's vengeful, emotional, clings like smoke. Honestly, I'm not sure I can banish her, but I'll try." He motioned them to follow, but stopped Sarah at the hallway. "You stay here. No coming back, no matter what." Sarah protested, worry etching her features, but his authority brooked no argument. May cast a last glance at her friend before stepping into the shadows, the door closing with a finality that echoed her fears. The back room was a world apart, dark, damp, the air thick with dried herbs and something metallic, like blood mixed with earth. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with relics, animal bones, skulls that looked disturbingly human, teeth arranged in patterns, and then the jars, glass vessels holding floating forms, tiny and preserved, like specimens in a macabre museum. May's breath hitched. These weren't decorations. The medium noticed her gaze. "Don't touch anything. Some things here don't like disturbance." She perched on a worn wooden stool, heart pounding, as he explained their practice in hushed tones. In parts of Britain, some mediums raised spirit children, spirits of unborn or deceased infants, bound as servants, messengers, or protectors. It was forbidden knowledge, whispered in the same breath as black magic. A far cry from the harmless seances May had laughed about with friends over pints in a British pub. The medium approached one jar, his hand gentle on the glass. "Master needs your help," he murmured. "Do this, and you'll be free." With steady hands he opened it, scooping out the tiny form into a metal bowl. May averted her eyes as he lit it aflame, the room filling with acrid smoke and chants in an ancient tongue, perhaps Gaelic or something Celtic, evoking the mystique of Scottish Highland clans she'd read about in travel blogs. He mixed the ashes with a thick red liquid, blood-like, viscous, stirring until it formed a dark ink. Dipping a calligraphy brush, he inscribed 2 talismans on yellow paper, the strokes glowing faintly in the dim light. Handing them to May, he pressed a dot of the ink between her eyebrows, on her third eye. Heat surged through her, a burning clarity. The effort drained him. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breathing ragged. "The first talisman on your front door as soon as you're home," he instructed. "The second, burn at exactly 4 a.m. And that mark, don't wipe it. It seals your spirit, stops her from possessing you." He gestured to a smaller jar. "You're not going alone. Timmy here, one of mine, will follow and protect you." May swallowed, torn between gratitude and terror. This was no fairy tale guardian. It was a pet ghost, a concept as alien as it was chilling. "That's all I can do," he said, ushering her out. "Too much energy spent. Rest now." Sarah waited anxiously, and they drove back under gathering clouds, rain lashing the windscreen like tears from the heavens. The streets flooded, thunder rumbling ominously. May shielded the talismans in her purse, dashing inside her flat soaked. She affixed the first to the inside of her door, pressing it flat. But anxiety won. She burned the second early, watching it curl to ash in a dish, the red dot. The rain had smeared it to a faint smudge. Exhausted, 2 days without proper sleep, she collapsed into bed, clothes damp, passing out instantly. She awoke to a child's voice, playful and soft. Blinking, she saw him in the corner, a toddler, 2 or 3, chubby cheeks, big eyes, adorable like a cherub from a Renaissance painting. "Who are you?" she asked, half asleep. "How'd you get in?" He smiled. "I'm Timmy. The medium sent me to protect you." Disarming, no malice, just innocence, a stark contrast to Cindy's hollow gaze. "She's coming," he warned seriously. "You burned the talisman early, the door seal's weak, and your forehead mark, almost gone. Without it, I might not beat her." The air thickened. Electric. The front door flew open. Cindy glided in, hair dripping, form misty. Seeing Timmy, she laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "Even with another spirit, it's useless." Timmy braced, but they froze, eyes locked. Not fighting, talking, words distant like a dream. May pieced it. Timmy was the reincarnated soul of Cindy's lover, the man she'd poisoned, reborn but died young due to karma, captured by the medium as a spirit child. Cindy crumpled, knees buckling. "I didn't mean it. I changed my mind, tried to get back, but the door locked. Why forget the keys? Why end like that?" Tears streamed. She described her afterlife curse, reliving the moment eternally. Timmy knelt, voice gentle. "That night, after dinner, I was going to say, I'd signed divorce papers. We could have been together." Cindy's breath caught. A misunderstanding had doomed them. "Our son, he's reborn, in a good family, free." Cindy wept, guttural sobs breaking her. "We sinned too much, that's why we're stuck. But let go, Cindy. Release the hate." Her cries softened, form fading until she vanished, freed. Timmy turned to May, his image dissolving. "Goodbye, live fully." "Where now? Reborn?" May asked. "No, pet ghosts lose their souls. I vanish." Then he was gone. May sat in the dawn's dim light, wondering, did the medium know Timmy's past, planet, or coincidence? The air felt lighter, the building's hush peaceful now. Closure, not revenge. That's what some spirits sought. A lesson from Scotland's mystical underbelly that resonated far beyond her student days. As the first hints of dawn painted the sky over Edinburgh in soft hues of pink and gold, May sat alone in her modest flat, the silence no longer oppressive but profoundly peaceful, like the calm after a storm on the English moors. The air felt lighter, cleansed of the lingering chill that had haunted her nights, and she stared at the empty corner where Timmy had stood, his innocent face dissolving into nothingness. Questions swirled in her mind, like the mist rolling down from Arthur's seat. Had the medium known all along? Did he recognize the karmic thread binding Timmy to Cindy, that the little ghost boy was the reincarnated soul of her tragic lover? Was it a masterful plan, woven from the threads of ancient Scottish mysticism, or merely a cosmic coincidence, the universe aligning in ways beyond mortal understanding? May couldn't say, but in that quiet moment, she felt a deep gratitude for survival, for the glimpse into a world where the veil between life and death thinned like fog over the Thames. And therein lies the heartbeat of this tale. Not all spirits seek vengeance. Some are simply souls adrift, yearning for closure, a chance to untangle the knots of regret and misunderstanding that bind them. Cindy's story reminds us that beneath the terror of the unknown, there's often profound humanity, or what's left of it, echoing through the ages. What do you reckon? Was the medium pulling strings, or was it fate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this chilling Scottish legend. If stories like this give you that spine-tingling thrill, hit subscribe for more untold tales from around the globe. Give us a like if it kept you up thinking, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, keep exploring the shadows. Who knows what secrets you'll uncover?